Hi there and welcome back to my sixth video here. My apologies that it's taken a little bit longer than anticipated, but I've had a lot of work to do with my studies. But nonetheless, I'm back and always will continue to come back, so thank you very much for your patience. Anyway, as I said in the previous part, I'm back answering a few questions that have been asked over the last few weeks and months. So sit back and enjoy. I've been studying Tolkien's languages since around 2004, initially as a result of rereading The Lord of the Rings, and then spurred on by the films made by Peter Jackson. My area of concentration were the writing systems, obviously, although the spoken word interested me just as much. But I decided to learn both, and obviously logical to undertake the written word first, as I said in the first of these series of videos. Regarding the amount of time it took is a difficult one to answer, but given more time, no doubt I would have learnt much quicker. I was obviously going through studies just as I am now. So, however, depending on how far one wishes to go in learning, it can take anything from a few days to a few years. I myself have undertaken to analysing some of the scripts that have kindly been made public of Tolkien's work during his lifetime, just as a number of my other colleagues have. Clearly this is in the interest of a linguist such as myself, or a very avid fan of Tolkien's writing, and thus takes a lot longer than learning just one mode of writing, for example. Regarding the language, I've been studying Sindarin more over than Quenya, purely as I prefer the phonemic structure. That is to say, the means by which Tolkien pieced the language together from the parts of others. To my mind, it is a nicer language when written and spoken, but that's not to say it is the better of all his languages. It's just my personal preference. In the same way as the writing, I'm also studying the intricacies and underlying principles of Sindarin, specifically why Tolkien found the elements he chose to append to his language as aesthetically pleasing. So, whilst in theory it is possible to familiarise yourself with what Tolkien achieved during his lifetime, we can currently only speculate on some of the elements which weren't documented. So this in turn leads to a number of questions which invite further research outside the realms of Tolkien's own studies, and this has been the core of my own work over the last few years. Yes, my tattoos are written Elvish. They are rewritten using an English phonology and use various fonts. So on my left arm and on my right arm. Part of the tattoo on my left arm is written using the serif there, which uses the runes instead of the Tengwa, which we've been speaking about in the previous videos, but I will cover the rune-based systems in due course. I prefer not to state what's written, as I like to think that my tattoos are unique, having written them myself. But one thing I will say is that if you're thinking of having an Elvish tattoo in a place that's visible during your everyday life, then expect for people to question its origin. I, for one, get a little annoyed when people assume, and they'd say, why have I got Sanskrit written on my arms? It's not Sanskrit. Others will tell me it's Hebrew, and some will even ask which Asian language I have tattooed. But when answering, and in many cases correcting the inquiring public, it's worth it just to see how many people have an appreciation for Elvish or are aware of the works of Tolkien. Yes, there are both numbers and punctuation. I have had many people asking this question, and my sincere apologies for not getting around to answering it sooner. So I'll use this video to go over the markings that we know that have been used in the Tengwa systems. Obviously there are different markings for the rune systems and the Sarati, which will be covered in upcoming videos. But for now I'll detail those systems which we've covered in the previous videos, the Quenya and the Valerian modes. Okay, so we'll start with the comma, which is the same single dot marking for both Sindarin and Quenya. Next we have the colon marking, which only appears in Quenya, but this same symbol is also shown as a hyphen in some documents, so in theory could be used for both. Then we have the full stop or period for any transatlantic cousins watching my videos. Again, this is the same for both the languages. Then we have the end of document marking found in Quenya, and also the exclamation mark, and then the question mark. Again, these are not found in Sindarin. And finally we have the parentheses markings or brackets. Okay, then we have the numbers. Now there's a little more theory surrounding the numbers, but to put it in its simplest form, they appear just the same as how a letter would be represented by a symbol. So here is a slide showing all the figures from 0 through to 9. Now, for those that want to follow the course to the letter, the numbers are actually written with the least significant figure to the left, or put simply, written in reverse. But as I've always said, being an artistic language, it's open to interpretation as you see fit. So if you want to write it in the standard westernized format from left to right, then so be it. Okay. Yes, I will be teaching the spoken language, and it will be based on the Sindarin language rather than Quenya. I have noticed a number of people on YouTube undertaking this task already, and if you're wanting to learn just simple phrases, hello, goodbye, or happy birthday, or whether you want to confuse or impress your friends, then this is all that you're going to need. So don't hang around for my lessons if that's all that you want. It is my intention to teach the aspects of the spoken language in the same way that I have the written language. So without the theory surrounding the Elvish words, it's easily forgotten or simply not understood at all. But as I've already said, the written word is an important part of the learning process, and this will be used extensively when I come to write my lessons regarding the spoken language. Facebook account, yes, I do have a Facebook account. The link is now shown and is also in the notes section for the video. This is not a personal account for myself, as I don't really subscribe to the notion of sharing too much personal information. So this is more of a community where like-minded people can be kept up to date with what I'm doing and what others are also doing. I also post videos, translations and other musings on the Facebook account. So you'll find photos of some of these translations and tattoos and jewellery that I've done for other people. So please feel free to like or join or whatever it is. Sorry, I'm not well versed in social media circles, as the 98% of the population are. Okay, but please click and follow along. This is a very difficult question to put a definitive answer to, simply because many languages were an offshoot of the previous. So it's a question of whether we count those as languages in their own right or not. For example, Sindarin roots came from what's known as the Nomish language, which then formed Old Sindarin, and from there split into a number of other dialects. This was due to the fact that in Tolkien's stories he wanted to provide a plausible history for his world of Ardar, and subsequently the continent of Middle-earth. And so for those that have already read the Silmarillion, you'll already understand why there are so many languages. But for those that haven't read it, the early races of elves were taken on a journey to the lands of those that were sent to protect and oversee the world of Ardar. This was a very long journey, and not all the elves completed it. Some of the elves didn't start the journey at all, whilst others settled at various points along the way, from the Misty Mountains to Beleriand. Each of these settlers had their own variant of the initial tongue, hence there being a number of languages. But of these languages, two were concentrated on far more than others, the names of which I'm sure you're aware: Quenya and Sindarin. For those that are interested in the other languages, I would urge you to look into some of the journals that are available, and certainly the history of Middle-earth, written during the 80s and 90s, and edited by Tolkien's grandson, Christopher Tolkien. If you'd like to be pointed in the right direction, then please feel free to contact me. I'm frequently asked this question, and I will of course be happy to translate any script for tattoos or jewellery or any other purpose. As this is something I can do relatively easy, I don't insist on a payment for this, but as there's a level of responsibility involved, particularly with a tattoo, in that if it's wrong, it's bloody difficult to rectify. So to that end, I always triple check my work before committing to the translation, which takes a little time. So if people feel this is worth a small donation, then I'm not going to argue. But before you make a request, I'd ask that you would decide whether you'd like the translation written in Elvish or your own language. That is to say, if I'm writing the word friend, am I writing the Tengwa or the Serth for F-R-I-E-N and D, or am I writing the Elvish or the Sindarin equivalent, which is Melon? Either aren't a problem, and I'll be happy to hear from you. Examples, as I said before, can be seen on my Facebook page. Right, my university course, it's strictly speaking is more of an independent study, and these types of degrees are fast becoming available, as the respective areas of study can be quite literally independent. I'm very fortunate to have two mentor supervisors, both of which being very well read in the suitable areas sufficient to steer me in the right direction. My studies are nothing like what some may have undertaken as a previous postgraduate or an undergraduate, and there's a lot of effort put on the student being research based undertaking, hence the name independent study. I could prattle on for hours about exactly what it is that I'm studying, but I think most of you would fall asleep during this. So I'll leave it with you to get in touch if you're interested. But the bottom line is that the course itself is more of a one-off, as my supervisors are the only pairing in the faculty at De Montfort who can tutor such a subject. So whilst I don't want to speak on their behalf, it is doubtful that others will be able to immediately follow my footsteps. But again, if, like me, you're a complete nerd for this sort of stuff, then no doubt you will, as I did, find a way to concrete your learning through some means of academic qualification. So good luck. The answer to this depends on what you define as correct. Peter Jackson is a self-confessed fan of Tolkien's fiction and wanted to portray the Elvish language in a manner such as to reflect Tolkien's work. That said, some of his narrative in the movies included words that Tolkien himself didn't translate into Elvish for the books, and therefore Jackson needed someone to help him translate this additional dialogue. The problem was that some of the words he wanted spoken in Elvish didn't exist anywhere in the lexicon and therefore had to be created. For this, a linguist known as David Sarlo was brought in, long-standing scholar of Tolkien's work, and he used Tolkien's existing work to create the new words that Peter Jackson wanted. So although some of the words used in the film were of Tolkien's making, and those which Sarlo put in place for the purpose of the film sounded the part, the result was nonetheless a mix of both. Incidentally, these words that were created went on to become what we know today to be Neo-Sindarin. So, is the Elvish correct? It's an ambiguous question which you can decide the answer. Okay, so that's the questions answered. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks very much for watching. I will be coming back shortly with another video which will be covering the rune-based systems, which are similar in principle to what we've covered before in the Tenwa systems, but obviously look a lot different when written. So, again, thank you all very much for watching, and as always, I would love to hear from any of you, and don't forget to like my Facebook page, please. Okay, I'll see you all again next time. Cheers.